Michael Boyle's StrengthCoach.com presents the Strength Coach Podcast, brought to you by Perform Better, the experts in functional training and rehabilitation. PerformBetter.com.
Hey everybody, welcome to episode 213 of the Strength Coach Podcast, the official podcast of Michael Boyle, StrengthCoach.com, the world's best source for strength and conditioning information. You can try StrengthCoach.com out for 3 days, just $1, and you'll have access to all the articles, videos, and programs, as well as the best forum on the net. So many great conversations on there. It's the only place to have full access to Coach Boyle. He's on every day. Check it out at StrengthCoach.com. My name's Anthony Renna. The show notes are located at StrengthCoachPodcast.com. That won't be for long. I am actually putting everything that I'm doing into one neat package under a different website. Strength Coach Podcast, Strength Coach TV, Tell Me About That Book, Stop and Give Me 20, all my stuff, plus some other resources going to go under one site. I'm going to announce that in about 2 weeks. We'll have it ready to go. That should be for September. But for now, if you want to get in touch with me, shoot me an email to strengthcoachpodcast@gmail.com. All right, on the Coach's Corner, I spoke to Coach Boyle about all of the injuries, deaths, incidents that are happening right now. A lot of stuff in the news with strength coaches and just different programs. So we talk about that and some certification issues, etc. We also talked about his article, The Pistol versus the One-Leg Squat. And we also asked him what he's reading now. So that and much more coming up on the Coach's Corner in a little while. For the Results Fitness University Business of Fitness segment, Rachel Cosgrove is on to discuss marketing ideas. There are no secrets. For the Functional Movement System segment, we have on another segment from a video that Gray Cook did, and that was about the importance of evaluating ankle mobility. Really important. It's actually in most of the screens. All right, for the Hit the Gym with the Strength Coach, I have on Jonathan Beverly. He's the former editor-in-chief of Running Times magazine. He's also the author of Your Best Stride. We're going to talk about the book. We're going to talk about myths with running form, the importance of the body in running, the role of the hips in running, how speed can improve form, how shoes can help, form cues, and so much more coming up from Coach Beverly in a little bit. Lots of things to get to, so let's get on the phone with Coach Boyle. All right, now it's time for the Coach's Corner with Coach Boyle. Coach, how you doing?
I'm doing great, Ann. How are you?
I'm doing all right. Hanging in there. Summer's coming to a close. Not good.
No, I get leaves falling in my yard, which is crazy.
Man.
I know.
Jeez. Coach, a lot going on, man, in the strength and conditioning world. Let's just talk about that really quick. A couple things, that really impact us. Like, look, it wasn't a strength and conditioning thing, but the kid in Long Island who had the log over his head, kind of doing the log at Navy SEAL drill, who the log fell, he got hurt. I think that still affects us, but there was also this other incident that happened at Kent State where young man Tyler Heinz, passed away 2 days after reporting for summer conditioning, and then it turned out, I don't know all the details, so I don't want to really talk about that. It turned out the head strength coach he wasn't carrying certifications with the NSCA or the CSCCA, and basically, I think, a lot of people are worried, like you were talking about, and we had it in our newsletter, about the fact that, look, if we don't get ahead of this, right, and that was the article that somebody had posted, like how to get in front of some of the changes that can happen. And, you were talking about the NSCA will definitely police our field. They police every sport, not well, but they do police it. And with issues like this, courts get involved, which is far worse than the NCAA. Moving forward, what do you think really needs to happen here?
I guess sometimes you get into this idea of, is it a question of, wow, does common sense just need to prevail in terms of, okay, one, make sure you have a certified strength coach who's in charge at least. I can see maybe if you bring in a young guy who wants to get into the field and he's not certified, but you can't, and there's been a couple of these situations now, both the Kent State one and the Oregon one, where athletic departments, and I think the football coaches, but I don't want to say that was who it was, hired these guys who really were not certified. And again, you know me, I'm not certified. I'm not a CSCS, but I am an ATC. I do carry a certification that I personally feel is a higher level than what they would need to have, particularly when we're talking about things like sudden death and some of these things that are happening. But the common sensing, the thing with I get so angry about these mental toughness sessions, 400-pound log over their head with a bunch of high school kids. And what I feel maybe worse about is that kid might not have dropped it on himself. It might have been a kid in front of him or behind him that lost his grip.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? And you think, how bad is that someone else now has to literally carry that burden around the rest of their life, thinking, oh my God, I tripped or slipped or lost my grip or whatever, and then the log hit this guy. So, I mean, there's just so much stuff that we do that is just dumb. And I look at some of that stuff and I think, why? We talk all the time, and we're constantly talking about the idea of risk versus benefit. And I get, and it's been really interesting. It's kind of corresponded really well with the Tony Holler stuff. And we haven't published his football articles, but he's been writing some articles about sort of how to play fast football and how to have better football practices and things like that. And we're seeing sort of the different ends of the spectrum in terms of there are still these guys who think that they can scream and yell and kind of browbeat someone into becoming a man. And I just don't know if that's reality anymore. And I get it. In military situations where someone is dealing in literal life and death, that matters. We are not ever in athletics dealing in life and death situations. And I think as strength and conditioning coaches, we need to kind of get over ourselves and realize that that's the case here, that this is not a life and death situation, and that we can't sort of take lessons from the Navy SEALs or from any other military branch. I don't want, again, you don't want to sort of lump the blame on the Navy SEALs, but I don't know. I feel like it's just more of the same thing that we talk about.
Yeah.
Common sense, risk-benefit ratio. I mean, how many presentations have I put the common sense is not very common slide in? And I think that's the case. And who knows? You weren't there. We weren't at Kent State. And, we know that they had the rhabdo incident at Iowa when Chris Doyle was there. They had a great strength coach there. And yet they still had a problem. Not a death situation, but obviously a kind of medical emergency type of situation. And so we know it can happen to the best of us, but that makes it that much more important that we're really vigilant and that we're really thinking about what we're doing. And then sometimes you have to look and think, I'm not going to do this because something may go wrong. And again, me, I'm always getting accused of kind of being soft and being too worried about people getting injured. And I'm very willing to take that criticism and think, okay, that's fine. If that's the opinion that you want to have of me, I'm okay with that. Because hopefully, and again, I say this to my wife often, I'm not a religious person, but you think about the expression there, but for the grace of God go I, and you realize that, that could have been me. That could have been you. That could have been. There was a thing the other day, maybe even this weekend, an MMA fighter died after the fight. Just died. And there was nothing. The guy was exhausted. They called the fight off. They realized that this guy was in some kind of distress. They called an ambulance, but he died. They don't know how. They don't know why. So I guess it's just going back to this idea of being smart, using common sense, being vigilant, asking yourself really what you're trying to get out of a particular activity, and then what the potential downsides are.
Yeah.
Which obviously, in this case, these potential downsides over the last month are obviously worse than anything that we could hope to imagine in terms of 2 deaths.
Yeah. And what about from the certification perspective? I just want to get your thoughts because, let's just say this coach at Kent State, let's say it was you. And let's say this year you got hired at a college program and then you let the ATC certification run out. Let's just say that happened. Big deal, right? Technically. So an incident happens in next year when you start working with this team? Here you are, 30 years in, but you're not certified, okay? Which certainly could have happened. I can't say it. I have no idea. I'm not saying that. But so what do you think we need to do to make sure in terms of certification as well? Obviously, that should be up to the school, I guess. But the worry here is that the NCAA is going to come in. But, like, let's say this coach is, like, extremely qualified. Supposedly all the coaches under him all had their certifications. And maybe he just let his run out. What are your thoughts on the certification piece of this issue?
In all honesty, my thoughts personally, I don't think it really matters at all. But the problem here is that you're going to get tried in the court of public opinion. And that's what I always try to explain to everybody in terms of you've got to think like a lawyer. Personally, I don't think that matters a bit. But I also know that when push comes to shove, when it comes to litigation, that's going to be a big deal. And that's the part that I try to get everybody else to understand is that even though I may not put a lot of stock in certification as a measure of your education, the world does. And I think that's what we've got to realize when we're out there in the world and competing in the world and training people, that other people think that stuff matters. I mean, so you've got to be careful. And we at MBSC, that's one of the things we talked about. We make all our trainers get some kind of personal training certification, or either they have their CSCS or NSCA PT, or go take an NSM course. I don't care. Get certified in something, so that if someone says, "Are all your trainers certified?" Yes, they are. And make sure that everybody's CPR is up to date, and make sure that you have an AED, because we live in, I've wrote this in a bunch of forum threads, we live in a litigious world. We live in a world where people want to sue people. No one looks at something and says, hey, that was just an unfortunate accident. We're really sorry that happened, and we hope it doesn't happen again. What they do is they think, I'm going to sue somebody. I'm going to make somebody's going to pay for this one way or the other. And you don't want to be that guy. You don't want to be the guy who ends up losing his house or whatever it is because you got involved in one of these types of situations. So I think we have to look at it from both ends of the spectrum. My sort of anti-certification kind of bias withstanding. If you're going to be in these situations, then you'd better make sure that external person, the juror, the lawyer, can look at you and think you're qualified. Because again, when these things come out in the media, what is it? Oh, they had a non-certified guy out there running the workout. And as you said, could be somebody like me. I could have been with the Red Sox. Something could have happened. And someone said, he's not even a certified strength coach. He's an athletic trainer. There's no way he should be doing strength and conditioning. And if somebody reads that in California, they'd believe that. They'd think you're right. This guy's not even certified. He's presenting himself to be a strength coach, and he's actually an athletic trainer. And what right does he have out there doing this stuff anyway? And if we read it, you might find it very believable. Then obviously if you read my resume and my background, you might think, oh, well, maybe not. Because I've told people that. People have asked me to be an expert witness in trials, and I've said, I'm not going to be a suitable witness for you because I'm not somebody. If the lawyer is smart, they will bring up the fact that I'm not certified. And that will lessen my credibility to a jury. Because again, we think a jury of my peers, it's not a jury of strength and conditioning coaches. It's a jury of average moms and dads from all over America. So that's where I think we've got to still be conscious of the fact that this is the world that we live in, and we got to play by the rules of that world.
Yeah, yeah. And, you never, the other thing is, the kid that I sold the gym to, he had a kid in here who was just doing like a side throw with a med ball. And it turns out the kid ended up breaking his leg doing it. And there was here's a really good young athlete who was coming off of like a month before, had something to do, was cleared by the doctor, everything was fine, all the protocols fine, and the kid ended up breaking his leg. I mean, all right, he's certified. There's nothing he could do. It was when he was doing the side throw, and he just stepped wrong. And unfortunately, it was in his place. And good thing that the people are, they're like, look, you didn't do anything, and he has insurance, and it's fine. But if the kid, the business, they could get sued just from that. And there's no fault at all of his, right? So you got to be careful.
Yeah, no, that's what you do. And I think that's the part that you have to realize. We had a guy the other day drop a dumbbell on his finger, and he lost the tip of his finger.
Oh.
And it was one of those where, he put the dumbbells down hard on the ground, and the dumbbells bounced, and he had his hand on the ground, and the dumbbell bounced up, and it landed right. I mean, it's one of those perfect storm. Couldn't have been, worse luck. But again, this stuff happens. I mean, we've had, over the course of the years, we've had little problems. Luckily, no big problems, but we've had little problems. We had one of my friends years ago at one of our seminars or mentorships, whatever. He was a physical therapist. He tore his ACL jumping over a hurdle or hopping over a hurdle. It was like he hopped over the hurdle, he landed, he collapsed. It turned out he had a torn ACL, and all of a sudden we've got a 40-year-old physical therapist with a torn ACL in our facility.
Yeah.
From doing again something that somebody's done a million times. So I guess it just keeps going back, and I've said this. I mean, people I think who've heard me speak, I've said it over and over again. You have to think like a lawyer. You have to ask yourself, what is going to happen if this goes wrong? Do I have a defensible position? And again, in these horrific sudden death situations, to have somebody just to be in that kind of situation where you've got whatever it is, who knows? I mean, the blog one, maybe it was the football coach who decided they were going to bring in a group like the program or one of these things who does this sort of mental toughness training, and who knows that there's people springing up doing these things all the time. These companies that they'll do that for you. They'll do the military style team building. And that team building may involve things just like that. And it can very easily blow up in your face.
Yeah.
And has.
Coach, let's move on. We got a lot of talk about, you wrote a great article, a pistol is a one-leg squat, but a one-leg squat is not a pistol. The general consensus was, the pistol, it's really not worth it. If people can do them, it's great, but we don't really teach them in general. So, obviously, you're obviously in favor of the one-leg squat. My question would be also for you. Ben Bruno, I think, he calls it a skater squat. The one squat where he kind of like...
I know exactly, yeah.
That one, to me, almost seems like a rear foot elevated without the rear foot elevated. And so it's like you seem to get a really good position. It's always got a back flat, where I think even the one-leg squat on the bench, there can be some rounding. Also, it's hard sometimes to tell where somebody is in terms of, how far they're going down, or et cetera. It's probably easier with this. How come you haven't really incorporated the skater squat idea into your single leg work?
We have actually. We do a lot of, we've referred to that now as a one-leg deadlift, because one of the things that I've realized in this, I'm trying to get everybody to sort of change their terminology. Ben's killing me because Ben always calls it skater squat. We used to call it a skater squat because it really looked like the position that you were in, sort of from a takeoff and skating. But
speed skater
as
squat.
As I started to analyze the movement more, I realized it looks like a single leg version of the trap bar deadlift. If you look at sort of femur angle and trunk angle, you end up in a situation where the femur angle is above parallel and the trunk angle has dropped. So whereas in the one-leg squat, obviously we might be trying to stay as close to perpendicular as we can. In that one-leg deadlift or skater squat, we're probably allowing somebody to go to like a 45-degree bend at the hip. And so we've done that. I would look at that and think totally different exercise in terms of really a hip-dominant exercise, as opposed to looking at it and thinking about it being a knee-dominant exercise. But again, I think that one you have no problem with psoas, no problem with hip flexion. What we found with that is that most people really have trouble, can't even, we're usually stacking 2 ARX pads. It's funny how you look at that and think that should be easier in theory, and it is significantly harder in practice.
Yeah, no, I agree. It's a tough one. So wait, let's really quick. SLDL, I always considered a single leg deadlift. So you consider that what, straight leg deadlift, even though it's not a straight leg?
Yes, but exactly. So, and that's if you go back to sort of the original functional training for sports. That was one of the things that we said, is that we called that I always said it's like the longest, most redundant one leg straight leg deadlift. and so it's because what we want to do is distinguish it from a single leg deadlift. Like if I looked at a single leg deadlift, it would really be that skater squat. If I looked at a one leg straight leg deadlift, it would be that sort of what some people call RDL. And again, I have my own problem with the RDL thing remaining. And so we just went, because when we did straight leg deadlifts, and this goes back to the 70s, there were two types of straight leg deadlifts. There was a straight leg deadlift where literally we'd stand on a box and try to pick a bar up off the floor with our legs completely straight. Years later, Paul Chek started talking about this one leg straight leg deadlift, and we started calling it a modified one leg straight leg deadlift, because I remember Chek saying, if you have about a 10 or 20 degree knee bend, you'll really get more glute than hamstring. If you go completely straight leg, you're going to get primarily hamstring and very, very little glute. So we've kind of stayed with that terminology, and I guess it is kind of messy a little bit, but I think in our lexicon, it's worked out okay.
All right. Coach, before you go, what are you reading right now?
So I am so bizarre. I don't know if you saw my Instagram post, but I'm reading, I said the definition of incongruous. I'm reading Essentialism and Think Like a Freak at the same time.
Okay.
So how can you be working on Essentialism and trying to read two books at the same time? But I started to Think Like a Freak, and then I got a new Vince Flynn book, which is like totally unrelated.
Yeah.
And I finished the Vince Flynn book, but by then I had forgotten so much of what I read from Think Like a Freak that I had to go back and start over.
Oh,
so
man.
I've reread the first half of Think Like a Freak again, and at the same time, people kept talking about how good Essentialism was. So I went and grabbed Essentialism that was on my shelf and kind of peeked at that. And so I've literally been trying to read 10 pages a day of each. And now I also have Tools of Titans sitting there because although I'm not a Tim Ferriss fan, I do really like the format of that book.
Absolutely. Yeah, good stuff. Yeah, I'm listening to Essentialism right now, and goes in line. A lot of books are talking about that anyway, but same idea. But a lot of other books recommended Essentialism too, so it's good stuff. All right. Well, Coach, thanks for doing this, and we'll talk to you next time.
All right. Thanks, Dan.
All right, hey everybody. Just a reminder, Perform Better is having their annual summer sale. Lowest prices of the year. It's going on until September 30th. All the top sellers are on sale, not just the little guys, but you got super bands, cook bands, test kits, Dynamax balls, rollers, mats, kettlebells, ropes, sandbags, TRX, you name it. Everything's on sale. Right now, this is the last summit coming up this week out in Long Beach, so you still have a chance to get signed up for that. And also up in Rhode Island, up in the Functional Training Institute, you got functional dry needling coming up on September 29th and 30th, and then the barefoot training specials level 1 on October 21st and 22nd. Check all of their continuing education out at performbetter.com. Here's Gray Cook.
We've got a lot of different movement patterns in the screen: a squat, a hurdle step, a lunge, a push-up, a crawling pattern we call rotary stability. We got a leg raise, we got shoulder mobility. If you look deep, and I mentioned this in the movement book, there's a lot of intentional redundancy. You're flexing the hips quite a bit, you're extending the hips quite a bit, and you're not just doing it once, you're doing it over multiple patterns. Because when we see inconsistency between your lunge and your squat and your hurdle step and those other movements, inconsistency means you've got a bad pattern, but those parts work very well in other patterns. You thinking software now? You got to have a lot of ankle mobility to get a 3 on the lunge. You got to have quite a bit of ankle mobility to get a 3 on the squat. What if you get a 3 on one and a 2 on the other? Well, the mobility is being used in a much better way at the pattern you do at a 3 level than a 2 level. So when we see a consistent limitation all the way through movement, we're thinking mobility, okay? And I don't think we can key on the ankle enough. As a matter of fact, we built the FMS to be very ankle-centric. We load your ankles and see if they bend in a squat, in a step, in a staggered stance, or a lunge. But we even need to be clearer than that. Why? Because the evidence is saying squeeze those ankles, they can drive a lot of bad behavior. So we've got this little ankle screen, and I want you guys to look at it and learn and read something about it, because long before we do single leg stance or motor control, if you're doing it on an ankle that doesn't have enough motion to at least send the bare minimum sensory information up, you're going to have a problem. Now, stop right there for a second and think about how many articles are taking up space on the interweb, the World Wide Web, on glute activation. Let's activate the glute. Well, let's go back to a principle. Are we going to try to change behavior without changing perception? If I'm going to change behavior without changing perception, I'm just going to make you do lots of bridges and deadlifts and squats and hope that you will grow glutes and behave better with hip extension. But if that ankle is restricted, then it doesn't send a signal that we need hip extension. Think how that works together. When I'm dorsiflexed at my ankle, I'm extended at my hip. And if I can't get into dorsiflexion, I don't need hip extension. What do? I use my quad and my calf to advance my leg forward. So we're trying to change glute behavior very often without amplifying ankle perception, which drives glute behavior. So we got a really good science saying long after your swollen and painful ankle sprain doesn't hurt anymore, nobody ever checks to see, can you cover the minimum? What's the minimum? Like 35 or 40 degrees. We got a really cool way to check that. You check it right now with your iPhone. But my point is, be consistent and be valid. So we've painstakingly looked at which ankle mobilities actually test well among multiple testers in multiple environments. We got a screen. If you clear the screen, I'm not saying your ankle's perfect. I'm saying your ankle's not your biggest problem in that pattern. But if a screen catches your ankle, I can't prove it's not until you get me some ankle mobility. And ankle mobility is really, really easy to do. If you've got hips and knees that aren't restricted and you can measure that and the ankle is, there's a good chance the ankle's restricted. Well, because the joint alignment is out or because we got too much tension in the muscle. Simple. But when you've got a restricted ankle and you also know your hip mobility, like in a Faber test or internal, external, is also limited, that's a pattern. Bad internal and external rotation right here, bad dorsiflexion, plantar flexion down there. You got to break the pattern. So if you're not working on the hip and the ankle simultaneously, you won't be sending a better, healthier signal. Now, when we sprain that ankle and it swells up, it gets limited with muscle tone and the extra fluid in the joint. But what happens when that swelling goes down? Is the ankle clear? A lot of people aren't, but the ankle doesn't hurt, so they don't focus on it. So they go on a run, they play the sport, they do the thing. And before you know it, 6 months in, they don't even know they got an ankle problem, and yet they do. However, measurably, and science is telling us this, 6 months after that ankle is no longer on your radar, that glute on that same side of that ankle still isn't back to where it needs to be. Why? Well, if you lost dorsiflexion in the ankle, you don't need that extra 10 degrees of hip extension, and that's sort of what the glute does, and it's what keeps the glute awake. So we can just smack on your glute and try to wake it up every day with a bridge or a squat or a deadlift, or we can make sure your ankle's above the cut and put you in a robust environment that requires dorsiflexion and hip extension at the same time, and your brain will never forget it because they're really complementary movement patterns and they work together in a pattern.
For more information, visit functionalmovement.com.
Hey everybody, it's Rachel Cosgrove, owner of Results Fitness and Results Fitness University with the Business of Fitness segment. And I'm going to touch on some marketing ideas today. I actually want to share, as I talk to some of our coaching members and some of the trainers I speak with, I actually did a talk last year at Perform Better on marketing. And I know this is one of the things that as a trainer, we tend to, kind of avoid or feel like it's overwhelming. Marketing is kind of an overwhelming topic. You don't know where to start, don't know what to do. And so I want to just kind of make it simple. I want to, really boil it down. First of all, I just want to say that there are no secrets. There's no big, marketing secret. I think, many times we see people have these, this, funnel or this, once we know the right funnel or we know the right message or we know the right, it's that you think you're going to land on this secret and then that's going to be the game changer. And then that's once you have that answer that you're done. And that's never the case with marketing your business. Marketing is something that's ongoing. It's something something that every single month as an owner, you want to think about, what is my promotion? What is my campaign? Who do I want to hit? Who do I want to target? And what's that message that I'm going to get out this month? Next month, it could be something different, different time of year, different, you're looking for a different market. Maybe you see something working. So there's, a couple things that I just want to hit on when we talk about marketing. Yes, I do think of it like a funnel. At the top of that funnel, there are a number of ways we can reach our market. We can reach our market by getting in front of them. We can go out and speak in our community. We can put an ad in our local newspaper. We can get on social media. We can have word of mouth. If our clients are saying nice things about us, or maybe even on Yelp, we could have referrals, so that's still one of our main sources. I mean, always, I think, we've been open 17 years and still to this day, referrals are one of our number one sources of new members coming in. So having a way that you can drive those referrals, those are all, really that top of that quote unquote funnel, so to speak. So, everything you can think of where you can get in front of that market that you're looking to attract. And then as you move them into your funnel, one of the things I encourage you to do is to think about how can you, start to, as they're aware of you, right? They become aware of you at that point. They've maybe seen your ad or they've heard from somebody that you're great. And so they decide they want to know more about you. What is your next step for them? Where do they do next? Ideally, you get them into some kind of a database. So whether they're in your email database, you could also, at this point, we've started using texting as well. So if you can get their email, if you can get their cell phone number, that's even better. And then also their actual home address. So you could actually mail them as well. So this way you could actually hit them in 3 different ways because we really at this point have to build that, that relationship with them. We have to show them that, they can trust us. They want to get to know you. And so that, that way they can see if this is going to be a good fit. Maybe they're not quite ready yet. But you have to have some way of really funneling them into some kind of a database so that you have control so that you can start to contact them on a regular basis. And so I would definitely start with email and getting an email out once a week to your database and just making sure that your email database is growing every week. If you just do that alone, you'll see that you'll start to increase the number of people coming through your door and you'll start to increase the number of clients you're signing up. So if that's the only step you take is to set up that email database, and just start to add to that weekly and start to consistently reach out to them, that will make a huge difference to your marketing. And then the third point I just want to touch on, so the first point is that there is no secret. The second point is consistency. So it's about, there's no like one magical thing. You just got to do it each month, month after month, and spend time each week working on your marketing. The third key with marketing to keep it, where you have this, ongoing stream of new clients coming in is you have to track. And I think so many people don't track, and it's such a simple step that will give you exactly what's working, exactly what's not working. You'll know exactly where your last 5 clients came in from. You'll know what, if you're putting all this effort towards, social media or towards, doing a marketing campaign or going to a networking group, and then you start to realize that, gosh, I haven't received a single client from that effort over the last month or 2 months, then guess what? It might not be a good use of your time and energy. So, but you won't know that unless you're tracking. So make sure you have some way that you are tracking your leads as they're coming in and whether or not they're becoming members, if they're qualified leads, so that you can then drive your marketing based on real information so that you really know what's working and what isn't. So just keep those things in mind as you're tackling your marketing. Again, it's, if you are overwhelmed by it, start to just boil it down to the simple steps, which is step 1, just thinking through that top funnel of what are some ideas you could do to start to get in front of your target audience. And then step 2, let's set up that email database and start to get in front of them regularly, start to contact them, start to nurture that database. And then even just those 2 steps, you're going to start to find clients are going to start coming in. So then make sure you're tracking so that you know what you need to do more of. So hopefully that gets you guys started. If you have not started marketing your business, I know in the beginning, a lot of times it can be, people just come in and people are referring me, and it can be real easy. So it's easy to get lazy. As your business grows, you're going to have some kind of a system and something that works. So that hopefully will get you started in the right direction. All right. If you need more information, jump on our website, resultsfitnessuniversity.com. Also look us up on social media. We're on Instagram and Facebook as Results Fitness University.
All right, now it's time for the Hit the Gym with the Strength Coach. And today I have the former editor-in-chief of Running Times magazine. He was there from 2000 to 2015. He's been a runner his whole life. He coached adult runners with the New York Road Runners Club in the 90s, and he's coached junior high and high school cross country and track during the past 12 years. He's the author of Your Best Stride. Jonathan Beverly, thanks for coming on today.
It's my pleasure. Thanks for having me.
All right. Well, in general, the people that are listening on this show have kind of shied away from the traditional running that we talk about. And we had a coach on a couple episodes ago, Tony Holler, who was talking about really mostly about speed. I thought this would be interesting. I'll tell everybody the story. Last episode we had on Jacques Devore, and he wrote Maximum Overload for Cyclists, and he had sent me an email, and I said, yeah, send me the book, and Rodale sent me the wrong book, which was your book, and I opened it up right to the Bretzel, and I'm like, oh my God, this guy, the runner's talking about doing the Bretzel, and then I started to read a little bit, and one of the things that I loved was this sentence. Sorry to tell you that most of what's recommended in this page involves work. It stretches, exercises, foam rolling, and more, not simply cueing new patterns or changing your shoes. So you had me there. So nice job on that. But give us just a quick overview of the book, and I want to get into like the myths about running, etc.
I'm glad you got the wrong book. That's good for you, and I think good for everyone. So the book came about as editor of Running Times. Obviously, throughout the years, you have people proposing that they have the answer to form, and here's how you can run better. And it often became as a very prescriptive. You have to land this way. You got to hold your arms this way, or certain types of cadence, and as I heard all these different things, and then minimalism came about, and that was a big movement, and then that kind of got debunked, and a lot of the research, like every week you get research that says forefoot strikes more efficient, rear foot strikes less efficient, or the other way around. I said, what is really true about this? So I started doing research with biomechanists, physical therapists, strength coaches, running coaches, and said, what do we agree upon that is essential to a good stride? And that's sort of the genesis of the book. And where I ended up was that it's not a matter of, again, how like the line you read, it's not a matter of cueing certain things, and we don't run poorly because we have bad habits as much as we don't have the proper mobility and strength to make the patterns happen. And so even though your body knows how to run, and everybody runs beautifully when they're 4, you watch a kid on the playground and they want to go from one end to the other, they just levitate and get there. The lifestyles compromise that ability. And then when we try to run, your body's trying to use systems that don't work anymore.
Let me ask you, it's funny, there's two things for me that I want to go over really quick on that, but do you think we'd be better off if a kid, and I know you talk about some of the Kenyan kids, I think, in the book, if we never gave them any instruction, and we didn't have the lifestyle we're having, never mind that, but if we just never gave somebody instruction, would we probably be okay?
Yes, I really believe that running is a natural motion, that your body does know how to run. And a lot of the things you see, even as a cross country coach, we're starting the season right now, and you see people doing things, and you ask them sort of how, and somebody instructed them. A lot of things that are wrong end up well-meaning instruction. For example, people also say use your arms, and usually what people do then is they start swinging their arms forward, hard. You get your arms forward to your body and your balance goes back, and then you're out of balance. And a natural arm swing is a quiet arm string beside you, and it's going behind your body. And I think you would do that if you ran often and regularly. And one thing I saw in Kenya is that kids really do run to school, but they're just getting there to school. They're running for transportation, and that's a very different running than most people do. Most people only run, as parts of sports, and so then that's a sprinting and sort of a powerful run. And then when they go out to run easy, it's a stilted jog because they haven't done that for their lifetimes.
Absolutely. This reminds me, too, I was telling you earlier, of so much of like what the Titleist Performance Institute was talking about in terms of, in golf, a lot of the golf instruction revolved for so long around different methods of the swing. And they tried to fit people. There was even like a golf instruction company that would, you would go in, they would film you, and then they would put you up to somebody maybe your size or like the way they were swinging with no real consideration of maybe you don't have the hip mobility or the thoracic mobility or the glute strength that's needed for certain swings. So it's very similar to what you're trying to talk about in the book.
That's exactly right. And that's the thing with, again, when we saw with minimalism, they said, okay, these heavy shoes are making you run improperly. And they probably were encouraging that, but that was because people weren't able to do it. And so you put on, you go run barefoot, and it should be the natural way to run. But if you don't have the mobility and the balance and the strength to do it, you're just still going to run improperly no matter how much you try. And you just physically can't do it. So as you're saying, like the golf swing, it's not a question, okay, I'm going to swing it exactly this way. Well, you said you don't have the shoulder mobility and the thoracic mobility and the hip mobility to do that. And so it's going to twist. It's going to do something different. Same with running.
Absolutely. Well, one of the myths you were talking about was that there is no such thing as the perfect stride, but obviously, there are certain things that would probably be beneficial to be able to do that would be smart. But just give us those. Right. Just give us an overview of the two myths. Yeah,
exactly what you were just saying right now. The golf swing. They're trying to say, okay, this is what Tiger Woods looks like, and he was the best. And so people would think if I could swing just like Tiger Woods. Thing is, they're not even at their ideal. They're not him. They don't have the same leg length. So for a runner, you say Mo Farah, he just won the 10,000 meter again at the World Championships in London. If we could run like Mo Farah, if we all run exactly like him, then that would be ideal. The thing is, leg lengths aren't the same. The tension of joints are the same. All the different parts of you, just like a voice. My voice is different than your voice because the length of my throat and the vocal cords, things like that. We don't expect to sound the same. You shouldn't expect to look exactly the same. But having said that, there are characteristics. I mean, if you look at all the people running in that 10,000, they all look more similar than if you took them and then compared them to somebody out for their fitness jog, because there are certain aspects of the stride that are more efficient, that are more natural, that these people have trained. So the thing is, you can't, as we said before, the myths are there's a perfect stride. No, everybody has their own stride. But that leads to the other myth is sort of, well, this is my stride. I can't do anything about it. Yeah. And that's incorrect too. I mean, this is who I am. So what should I do? Yeah, this thing is, you aren't you, as we just said. You aren't you when you were 4. You aren't you that you would have been if you had grown up running and walking for transportation and gardening and doing all the mobility things that we did before we got in offices and sat down and drove and all those things. So you need to correct those things and then let your body shake up the systems and let your body find its best stride again.
Very cool. Now, like I told you before, we're talking to strength coaches, so you are preaching to the choir, but I wanted to kind of dig a little deeper into that aspect of it in terms of, look, I can tell you as a golfer, right, you're going to need some good mobile ankles and a good glute strength and good hip mobility and core strength or core stability and a good body awareness, good thoracic mobility. I know some of the things that we need. In general, everybody needs those things anyway, but what are some things that we, as strength coaches, we want to look for? I know you talk about the hips a lot in the book, but what are some of the things that we're going to want to look for to make sure our athletes are ready to kind of, have that natural running movement?
Yeah, that's really, and I think what you said, what we all need is, it's all pretty similar. I mean, we're all compromised somewhat in the same ways. We've been sitting since we were 4, and we've been reaching forward, for driving, computers, cell phones. So we've had this whole forward crunching from our hips, from our shoulders, that we need to correct. So hip mobility, get the hip flexors to open up and loose enough to have hip extension. A lot of people really don't even have hip extension anymore, the ability to move the knee behind the hip. If you don't have hip extension and you go to run, you only have one option. You have to bring the leg forward, land, and then back to zero. If you watch Mo Farah running, he lands close to his center of gravity and then drives far back. And that hip extension, a pushing motion, is natural power motion. Okay, so whatever happens there too, if you don't have hip extension, that you don't use your glutes, so your glutes get weak. And your glutes are the most powerful fatigue resistant muscle, and the ones designed to make you run. If your glutes aren't working, then your hamstrings take over and your calves take over, and you end up with all these problems that runners have. The Achilles tendon problems, the plantar fasciitis, the hamstring problems. Most of that stems from the fact that the strides are reaching in front and landing in a braking motion, and then not driving backwards. So that's the hip part, and then the upper body part is similar. Your arms are forward, your shoulders are hunched, your arms are in front of you. It throws your whole balance off. And again, in order to run, you have to be in front of you again. So if you got to get your chest loose, the back of your shoulders strong enough to hold your shoulders back so that your arms can drive backward. Again, look at the top runners. The one thing you'll always see, their hands might do different things, their arms might do a little bit, but their arms are driving back. The arm swing is a backward swing, and people don't have the mobility or the strength to do that. I see that so much right now, starting cross country again, and so many kids are just hunched forward. They cannot get their arms to drive backward. Their arm ends up, flailing sideways or something, rather than a nice, efficient elbows back swing.
So what are some things that you're doing? I mean, when you see that, and you're technically, obviously you're not the strength coach, but
right.
What are some things that you're going to do as a coach? What are some things that you found that you've had to do to kind of help fix those things?
Yeah. So for the hips, getting good hip stretches. I mean, there's a variety of those. There's, sort of the lunge posture, kneeling, going into a dragon pose. The bretzel is awesome. That's sort of the whole body, because you've got your lats and your shoulder coming back, and then you're grabbing your leg, and the whole thing is pulling against what I'm just describing, against the hunching. It's opening up the chest, it's bringing that back, and then you're grabbing your leg and you're pulling, and your hip flexor open. So that's the mobility side. And then we do squats and teach them how to do squats properly, where you're using your glutes, not your quads. Bridges, side leg lifts, and again, that one's one you really need to work on to make sure that they're getting the glute medius, not the hip flexor, not letting their hip roll open. Those are the key ones I just get everybody doing almost every day. Upper body, are doing like Superman IYT, some rows and lat work to get the back, to get their shoulders, get things back. The upper body, I'm beginning to think, is even more important, and some of the other people I've talked to have said the same thing, that I don't know whether it's because of cell phones and things, or just that we're paying attention, but people have just sort of ignored the upper body with running. I think it's crucial. You cannot run well if you can't get yourself upright. I mean, it's the balance, it's the posture part, and then it's the arms driving backwards. So David McHenry from the Nike project said, there's no magic hip flexor stretch or glute activation. It's doing them. It's not the one that's the best. It's doing them just every day, doing them and correcting for this.
Absolutely. Well, let's just talk a little bit about, I'm going to jump ahead to some of the other cues, because in the back, you like, I know you said it's not going to be about cues, but you did put some cues in terms of some things that we do want to make sure. So from the, because obviously our coaches, when we have people do certain things, we're always going to want them to, we're still going to look at some form, even if they're just running in for a warm up. So you kind of like say, right, run tall. What does run tall really mean for you?
Yeah, I it's funny because I've talked to people and said I almost didn't put that chapter in, but people still queue on that chapter. I think it is important, but because the thing is that people want to go to there immediately, and it's like, and so at the beginning of the chapter I say, if you haven't gotten the rest of the book, this isn't going to help you because you're not going to be able to hold these. But okay, run tall is the main cue, and heard it from everybody from Dina Castor's husband to as you said, strength people that are physical therapists. That okay, so run tall is to get yourself in an upright, balanced posture. Most of us spend our lives in a crunch posture, even when you're standing up. A little bit of hip flexion, too far back on your heels, too locked up. And so run tall is you can reach. One way I cue it is just reach for the top shelf. Just reach as high as you can without getting on tiptoes. That brings your shoulders up, above your thoracic region. Your chest is up. Your abs are somewhat contracted. Your hips are rotated forward. The bottom part forward, and you're connected all the way. So from that posture, then you can run in a way that every stride is actually pushing you. You're not rotating. You're not crunching. You're floating above you're balanced above your hips. So that's run tall, and once you get somebody in that posture and feel it, they tend to feel it. Often when they get fatigued, they start crunching again. The shoulders come forward, their butt goes out. It's a little sort of a sitting posture. So you got to get them up again. You got to get tall, and it takes strength to hold it. It takes strength to be able to run tall.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, obviously, because over time, they'll start to feel like they can't hold that position up, and that's where we were talking about with the, that balance program of the upper body with the pulling, and maybe even 2 to 1 in the beginning, two pulls for every push. What about run soft, run quiet? What does that mean for you?
Yeah, this is interesting that. They've done some research where you just tell somebody to run quietly, and they do end up running quieter and softer. They have less impact. I think what happens is that as you think about quiet, that you tend to not reach more. I mean, reaching is the sin of running, where if your foot is going too far in front of you, and then you slap on the ground. So when you think about being quiet, think that you're running over eggshells, you want to break them. You tend to take a smaller step and a lighter step, and so you can actually run quieter in that way. And so this gets to what minimalism talked about too. It was quick steps, small step, quiet steps, light steps. If you take off your shoes, you have to do that because you don't want to slam onto your foot. But then to go faster, you do need to generate power. But once you learn how to run quietly, that power ends up being applied appropriately. You're pushing, you're driving hard with the glutes. You're driving, and you still can land fairly softly, but then the power comes on the push off, not a slamming down.
And I think that was the issue with a lot of people who got into some of the minimalist movement. Was this idea that they just they didn't scale it back in the beginning. They just they said, well, I run, 3 miles 3-4 times a week. I'm just going to go out, and they went out and ran like they normally do or tried to do.
Right.
And that's where I think a lot of the problem was. And obviously with Vibram making certain claims,
right.
That was another problem. But, I think a lot of people just went out and just thought, okay, they said I should run, with the minimalist, with the 5 fingers, etc., and I'm gonna go out and just do what I normally do.
Right. Yeah, we did an article in Running Times with Jay Deshari, who's all through my book here. He's a physical therapist in Bend that's really studied this stuff. Called "Are You Ready for Minimal?" Which is talking you have to be ready for it. You can't just go and put these on. It's going to change everything. Which is, again, I have a chapter on shoes, and said, again, 2 myths there. One is that shoes can correct you if something's wrong, and the other that shoes can change you. I mean, neither one is correct. Shoes are just a tool to protect you somewhat from the ground.
Yeah.
But you need to have the strengths.
You know what? I was going to save that for later, but while you're talking about it, what are, I know you were talking about what's the most important thing in terms of looking for a shoe? I mean, like there are these options. I mean, it was funny. I saw those. I'm not sure if it's Hoka, those really big ones, like the anti-minimalist. I'm like,
right.
All right, could you confuse people any more now with these minimalists and then the Hokas? So talk to us about some of the different the things you want to look for if you're going to be running.
So fit is more important than features, I think, is one of the key things. It has to fit you well, and particularly look for the forefoot fit, having enough room, both the width and the length around your toes, because when you're striding properly, most of your weight is coming down on that forefoot, regardless of where you hit the ground. People can heel strike and still be a very effective runner. There are elite runners that are heel strikers, but it'll be a quick kissing of the ground, and then the weight comes onto the forefoot. And when the weight comes on the forefoot, your foot needs to splay, needs to get wider at that point. The arch collapses. That's the natural motion. And then your toes should bend and in the hip extension as your foot goes behind you. If your shoe is too tight, that's going to slam your toes against the end of it, and the body's going to say this doesn't feel good, and you're not going to do that hip extension. So fit can actually affect your stride. As far as what's underfoot, mainly the research shows Benno Nig is a Swiss researcher who's worked out of Canada, but he's one of the main biomechanical researchers. He spent his life trying to prove this whole pronation control and what's pathological, how much pronation is too much, and how do you control it. He's retired now, but he's found that none of it matters, really. You can't tell. Pronation is a natural movement. Some people pronate too much, but you don't know how far. I was running Grandma's Marathon earlier this spring, and this woman came by me at one point, and she was pronating. I mean, her foot was just rolling, but she was running effectively, at mile 20 of a marathon. And if somebody had looked at her on a treadmill and tried to fit her, they'd say, "Oh, you need a motion control shoe." She doesn't need a motion control shoe. She can run fine, and that's what all the researchers say. So anyway, that's a little bit maybe too far down the path here. But the key that Benno Nig said is that your body really knows, like your body knows how to run, your body knows what's the best shoe for you. So you put on a lot of shoes, you run in them, you find the one that says, okay, this feels right. And he uses the term comfort. I think that might have been a mistake, because people think comfort as, cushy, luxury. What he means by comfort is more this feeling of it falls right, it feels right. When you're running in it, it hits the ground where you expect it to hit the ground, and it rolls the way you expect it to roll, and it feels right when you toe off. Yeah, and because it matches your stride, it supports your natural movement pattern. And that's the best shoe for you, no matter what anybody says. Oh no, you're an overpronator, or you're too big, or something. No, if you find a shoe that works, that fits for you, that's the best shoe for you.
All right.
Other than that, the one thing that they all say, it is true that the minimalist creed, that the least shoe you can wear is better. I mean, it's.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yes, that you don't want any more shoe than you have to have. Now, that phrase "that you can wear" is key. As you said, most people can't go out and immediately put on a Vibram. You need to work on strength, you don't have to. It's not an ideal. It's not like you have to be a certain point. That a minimal shoe, but you want as light a shoe and the least control to let your body move the way it wants to move.
Absolutely. Let's talk. You talk in the book about dynamic balance, and that term could be confused with some of the strength coaches that are on here. What is dynamic balance for you, and when you talk about it in relationship to running?
Okay. I got the term from Bobby McGee, as a Boulder-based elite coach, and I use it in the context of this forward lean. Is that forward lean? I think has confused people more than any other, besides foot strike, as far as in terms of form, because you tell somebody forward lean and they tend to bend at the waist, and that's improper. So again, talking about getting tall. So you're getting tall and you're getting balanced over your feet so that your weight is evenly distributed between the ball and the heel, and you're in a static balance over your feet where everything's comfortable. You're not using muscles to hold yourself up. But you can't run from that. Running is a forward movement. So just coming from that, doing like a ski jumper lean until the weight's over your ball, and then you feel like you have to step to catch yourself, to hold yourself. That's a dynamic balance. So you're sort of falling forward, but your whole balance, from your hips is forward of your feet, and then you're running. And so while you're running, because of the motion, you are in balance. So it's a dynamic balance, and that to stop, you have to pull back a bit, or you'd fall on your face.
Okay, good stuff.
It is a forward lean.
Yeah.
But it's so gradual that you don't feel it lean. It's just a balance point ahead of your feet.
Yeah, it's got to be something that's really hard. Like when you talk about coaching too, like to coach that, because people would probably overemphasize it.
Right.
Let's talk about trying to be a little bit faster and using speed, because I've heard the phrase, the phrase, this speed can really kind of clean up some of your form sometimes. So talk us about using speed in our workouts, also trying to, obviously when people run a race, they're trying to get a little bit faster. So Talk to us about that.
Okay, yeah, you're absolutely right, and I think this is again something that people tend to do wrong, is that they start running and they feel like, I can't go fast. I have to work up to that. I advise people from the beginning, even if they're overweight, even if they're just getting into it, to just go fast a few times a week. And so at the beginning and all the way through, one of the things that runners should do is hit their top speed at least a couple times a week.
Well, when you say that, how long do you mean? Just like picking okay, I'm for the next block or the next 50 yard. Okay, cool.
Yes, and that's, we start out with striders. And again, when I'm coaching people, I get them on a football field or a golf course, and you take off your shoes and do them, because that's ideal to get that feeling. And then you just accelerate till you hit your top speed, and as soon as it starts feeling like you're straining, you cut it down. So it ends up like a 10 or 12 second burst, and start out doing 3 or 4 of those, work up to about 10. With full recoveries, just walk or jog easy till you're ready to do it again. But as you said, that really does it cleans up a lot of things as far as your form, especially doing it barefoot. Is that you it's really hard to run improperly, reaching and overstriding when you're barefoot and when you're going fast. When you're going fast, you tend to grab and throw the ground back, which is exactly what you want to do. So it cleans up some of that, and then you work from that as far as doing the speed workout is trying to go faster without straining. I think is one of the real keys that people tend to start working harder, and speed without hurry, where you just work on a quick turnover, and the stride length will come with the strength. Because the stride length will come as just extending behind you, and you're getting more float time, not with a long reaching or muscling through stride. As soon as that happens, then you're actually going backwards. But there is some research that says the best way to run more efficiently is to run faster, to run with people who are faster than you, just trying to keep up, because you need to be more efficient. Your body will find the most efficient pattern.
Yeah, obviously you have to be careful. Like Gray Cook likes to saying he always likes to say is don't put movement on top of dysfunction. So
Right.
It seems a little bit contradictory to be, okay, if you go fast, but you don't want anyone going fast until they're kind of making sure that they're working on this mobility and glute strength, etc.
Exactly. But I think even almost anybody, just this quick burst is going to be good for them. Again, if you're not straining, not sprinting, but it's a quick turnover, just as fast as you can make things move comfortably, is going to be good for them. It's going to cue some of the mobility and strength issues that they're trying to work on.
Absolutely. Well, I'll remind everybody the book is Your Best Stride. It's Jonathan Beverly, and we'll have links to that. But it's how to optimize your natural running form to run easier, farther, and faster with fewer injuries, which is what us as trainers and strength coaches mostly care about. So, Jonathan, thanks for coming on today and talking about your book and about running and the stride and cleaning up some of these myths.
It's my pleasure, and it's kind of interesting for me to be welcomed by your group. I would talk about this in the book, but much of my life as a runner, I kind of had the philosophy, the ball player Kruk from the Philadelphia Phillies who said, I ain't an athlete, I'm a ball player. I think a lot of runners had the feeling, I'm not an athlete, I'm just a runner. And we didn't do any strength. I think we're coming around to your side to say, okay, we need to do this. So it's fun. It's fun to be to have learned that and to have people like you helping us to become better runners.
Absolutely, and it's good to have you out there spreading the message as well.
Good deal.
All right, well, that's going to do it for episode 213 of the Strength Coach Podcast. Special thanks to Chris Pryor and the folks over at Perform Better. Make sure to check out the summer sale happening right now. Crazy blowout prices. Everything is on sale. All the top sellers. You name it, prices have been slashed. Don't forget to check out performbetter.com for their education summit's coming up this week, but they have some other stuff coming up at the Perform Better Functional Training Institute. Special thanks to Coach Boyle and Jonathan Beverly for sharing their insights and philosophies into the world of strength and conditioning, performance enhancement, and running. Rachel Cosgrove for the Results Fitness University Business and Fitness segment. Check them out at resultsfitnessuniversity.com. Functional Movement Systems. Check them out at functionalmovement.com. And of course, remember you can try strengthcoach.com out for 3 days, just $1. You'll have access to all the articles, videos, and programs, as well as the best forum on the net. It's the only place to have full access to Coach Boyle. He's on every day. To access that offer, go to strengthcoach.com. Click the Join Now button to get started on your trial. My name's Anthony Rennie. You can reach me at strengthcoachpodcast@gmail.com. Thanks again, and I'll speak to you next time.